Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're diving into the high stakes, highly strategic world of South African estate planning. Now, stick with me here because we're looking at a seriously powerful but kind of complex legal tool. And it's one that forces a massive, literally life altering decision onto the people you leave behind. Right off the bat, we hit this classic, agonizing family dilemma that estate planners face, well, every single day. Think about it. How do you leave your wealth to your kids without leaving your spouse homeless? You want to make absolutely sure your children inherit the bulk of your hard-earned wealth, right? Maybe it's a family business, maybe it's a piece of property, but you also want to ensure that your surviving spouse is taken care of, that they have a roof over their head and an income to actually survive on. So how do you legally guarantee both of those things at the exact same time without risking one over the other? Well, the legal world actually has an answer to this. What is estate massing? Let's talk about the single pool solution. So estate massing is exactly what it sounds like. Under South African law, it happens when two or more people, and yeah, this is almost always spouses, sit down and agree in a joint, mutual will to take their separate individual assets and just combine them. They merge them into one single massive pool. So instead of the law looking at yours and mine when someone passes away, the legal framework suddenly looks at ours. Okay, so the absolutely crucial point here is that instead of treating each person's property totally separately upon death, the system takes that newly combined pool and treats it as one single estate. It's basically a giant unified package. And that single estate has a very specific predetermined destination, the chosen heirs, which, in most families means the kids. The individual lines of ownership blur entirely to serve this sort of greater family purpose. Now, abstract legal definitions can be a little tough to visualize, so let's look at the family farm example and see how this actually works in practice. Let's walk through how this builds into a real-life timeline. Imagine a farming couple. They wrote a joint will to mass their estate. Step 1, the husband dies first. Immediately, his assets are combined with his living wife's assets into that single pool. Step 2, and here is the major twist. The surviving wife doesn't get full ownership of that newly combined pool. Instead, she gets a limited right. Then, step 3. Because of this specific legal structure, the family farm is immediately locked into the name of their son, who is the ultimate heir. His inheritance is completely 100% secure from day one. Now, what's really interesting here is how we define that limited right the wife gets. The legal term for it is a usufruct. Say it with me, usufruct. It's basically like a lifetime VIP pass. The surviving wife gets the absolute right to live on the family farm, to use it, and to keep the income from, say, selling the crops, so she can comfortably support herself for the rest of her life. But, and honestly, this is a massive but, she has lost true ownership. She can't sell that farm. She can't leave it to someone else in a new will later on. She has the use of the asset, while the son holds the ultimate title. So why choose estate massing? Why would anyone choose to give up true ownership like that? Let's look at the strategic benefits. Estate massing is actually a highly specialized tool. It's found under Section 37 of the South African Administration of Estates Act, and people generally utilize it for 3 distinct strategic reasons. First up, it completely protects the kids' inheritance. It basically guarantees that the first dying spouse's half of the wealth makes it safely to the children without being squandered. Second, it prevents wealth dissipation. Think back to our farming wife for a second. If she remarries, she simply cannot accidentally give the family farm away to a new husband or stepchildren. Why? Because legally, she doesn't even own the core asset anymore. And third, it provides simultaneous security. It allows the parents to pass a major asset down to the next generation early, while making totally sure the surviving spouse is never left broke or homeless. It really is a remarkably balanced safety net. But as with all complex legal structures, there's a catch. Here's the big choice, and really the ultimate price of estate massing. See, when that first spouse dies, the surviving spouse actually cannot be forced into amassing against their will. They are legally forced, however, to make a massive, binary, and permanent choice. On one side, we have the first option, addiation. That means accepting the massing. But to get that lifetime benefit, like the crop income from the farm, the survivor must willingly surrender ownership of their own separate property right into that joint pool. And this choice is completely permanent. They can never change this will later. No way. On the flip side, the alternative is repudiation. That means rejecting the deal entirely. The survivor just says no thanks and keeps 100% ownership of their own property to do whatever they want with it. But In doing so, they legally forfeit absolutely any benefits or rights to the deceased spouse's property under that will. It is an incredibly stark choice. So, the crucial point to remember here is that you aren't just dealing with giving up property rights. You are navigating a serious financial minefield. Making this permanent choice carries severe consequences. If estate massing is structured poorly, throwing your own assets into a joint pool can trigger some major tax implications. We're talking massive hits from capital gains tax and donations tax. So yeah, this is definitely not a DIY weekend project. It requires absolute precision. And because massing essentially strips a surviving spouse of their individual ownership rights, South African courts do not take it lightly, at all. In fact, courts naturally presume against massing unless the wording in the joint will is entirely clear, absolute, and deliberate. The legal threshold for clarity here is just incredibly high. There is absolutely no room for ambiguity. Well, we've covered the brilliant protective mechanics of the single pool, the simultaneous security of the usufruct, and the harsh reality of that permanent choice of variation, which leaves us with a pretty fascinating personal dilemma. Would you be willing to permanently give up your own individual property rights to secure your family's future? It's a heavy, heavy sacrifice. But as you've seen, it might just be the ultimate act of generational protection. Keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.